Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back down the rabbit hole. I am your host, Monty Hook, and today I'm joined online. I'm in the studio in Bali, and Krystal Aranyani, is that how you pronounce it? Is that the best way of saying it? You're over there in California in the USA. You're my first ever USA guest online, so welcome. Thank you so much.
I'm actually Canadian.
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. So we have mutual friends, and we probably kick around in pretty similar circles. And you are an international Tantra yoga teacher, best-selling author, an entrepreneur, and what you describe as a sensual empowerment coach. Tell us more about this, and what do you actually? How do you describe what you're known for?
Okay, well, firstly, thank you so much for having me, Monty. Very excited to be here. What I'm known for, or I guess for the work that I do in the world, I'll first share my intention behind it, which is to empower others by reminding them of their divine essence and reminding them of their connection to everything, to mother, to each other, coming back to that truth, and also reminding them they aren't alone in this wild journey that we call life. And I do this mostly through Tantra and yoga. I hold worldwide retreats pre-COVID. I write books. I'm very present on social media. I also run a women's app, a spirituality and wellness app. I guess that's my main intention behind it, is to remember our essence, remember that we're enough, despite what society might teach us. So. Yeah.
No, that's really, really beautiful. I know you're doing really great work. So I'm sure there's a story behind, what led you to be doing what you're doing now and having some kind of passion for empowering other people, other women especially. So you mind sharing a little bit about your story, what led you to this place?
Okay, my story, where to start? I guess I'll start when I'm originally from Canada. I've been traveling full-time for the past decade. When I was 21, I'm 31 now, so when I was 21, I was in Canada getting out of a very highly abusive, physically and emotionally abusive relationship. I was engaged to be married. He was trying to get me pregnant. I wasn't feeling like I was ready yet, but I had my whole life planned for me. Like, we're planning the wedding and everything. And when you're in that cycle of abuse, if anyone watching has been through it, you may know it's very difficult to get out of that. So yoga did help me a lot. And my way out was really taking a leap of faith, which to me was a one-way ticket to China with absolutely no money, no work experience, completely alone, not knowing what to expect. And then I ended up staying in Asia for 6 years and traveling all around. My journey of teaching started when I just found my love for yoga. I started taking some teacher trainings throughout Asia. And then I started, because there was a point back in Canada where I was in and out of women's shelters. So I started visiting shelters in Asia because domestic violence is very big there, especially in China. Teaching yoga, and just started sharing my story, and I realized that's really what we need on our planet right now, is to share our stories. And the response I got was really beautiful. That's when I started getting online and sharing my story online as well. My intention has always been to share the toughest parts of my journey, to remind others they're not alone, because there's parts are along, the really dark times for me where I felt completely alone. And I just wanted to know there was one person out there who had gone through what I was going through and survived it. So that's really my intent with sharing what I do. Like all my dirty laundry is online. I have everything. There's not much I'm hiding, but it's with that intent that I think what we're really needing on our planet right now is relatability rather than looking like, oh, my life's perfect and all that. So I think that's where the attention on my platforms and the work that I do came from, was that relatability. And during my years in Asia, I've studied a lot of different paths and learned under a lot of amazing teachers. And I finally found my passion for Hinduism and eventually non-dual Tantra, which is a way of life. I know there's some misconceptions in the West about what Tantra is. It's a very profound and complex approach to life. So.
Yeah. So whilst we're on that, well, first of all, thank you for being so brave to share your story, and I think that's why you're saying that it's important for us to tell the stories, because it gives people permission who might not otherwise feel like they feel like they're on their own. I can't imagine what it's like to be in that cycle, but I imagine a big part of it is shame, and not speaking up because there's some level of shame and even guilt, and to empower people with the permission to speak to other people and speak their stories. It must be very, very liberating. So it's beautiful work that you're doing. So what did what has Tantra teached you? Like what was it that it gave you that you feel like it can give other people?
So Tantra is a path, as you mentioned. There's a lot of shame and guilt around our humanity, around our emotions, around our shadow parts, if you want to call them that. Tantra is one path that fully embraces everything. So many spiritual paths renounce worldly life. Tantra doesn't shame anything. It doesn't reject anything. It accepts it all as divine. That doesn't mean that we can't work to be better, but it also is the remembrance of coming back and remembering that right now we're enough. So on my path, it really helped when I first moved to Asia. I ended up in the modeling industry, and I was around like a very luxurious lifestyle, very superficial. And then I went into Thailand and started studying Buddhism and Hinduism and really went into yoga. And then I felt to follow the spiritual path, I have to renounce everything. So I stopped brushing my hair. I stopped wearing makeup. I stopped expressing myself in the way that I was used to up until that point as a woman in our society. So for many years, I was kind of doing this tug of war between life at an ashram, meditating hours a day, being fully I owned a small suitcase of things. That's all I owned. And then going back and seeing my friends from the modeling industry or friends from before who were, as kind of polar opposites. And then I felt inauthentic in both worlds because there was something missing. And eventually when I found Tantra, I came into this class with a lady who was teaching Kundalini and Tantra, and she was just in full goddess wear and makeup and all jewels and just this beautiful goddess. And I had only been learning yoga by, tantric and yogic masters in India that were very disciplined men. And I'd never seen it like this. This was in Australia as well. And, I was just like, how can I be this? Because this feels authentic to me. This is what I want. So Tantra, because it doesn't shame anything, that was probably the greatest gift it's given me, is coming into my power and sitting in both worlds and still feeling authentic and being, well, this is who I am. So I can sit with those people and have dreadlocks and express my truth and sit in the ashram and wear makeup. And even if they judge me, it's like, okay, well, this is who I am. So it's really a path of embracing all parts of yourself. Yeah,
that's really powerful. Do you think that had you not gone to that polar extreme of, living in ashrams and doing that you would develop the wisdom to really be able to embody that what you're describing as weaving those worlds together do you think that you'd be able to fully embrace that as you've been able to do without going to those polar extremes? Like you've experienced these wild extremes in life, and my observation for myself and a lot of people is, they find some weave, beautifully based on these extremes, right? So do you feel like you could develop that wisdom without that extreme?
It's an interesting question because I really love my path, and even the hard parts, I fully embrace it as part of my path. So it's interesting because I don't know if I would be here. Like there's parts of my life that like the difficult parts back in Canada. I'm like, would I be here right now if I didn't experience that? So it's something that I wonder sometimes, but I don't think I would have been led right here if I hadn't experienced both, because it's that feeling of, it was hard for me. So I was struggling and I was suffering in ways. And when we're suffering, that's when we have to dig deep into our soul and really ask, who am I? What's my purpose? So I don't think I would have been asking those questions if I wasn't struggling in those ways.
Yeah.
So.
No, that's very powerful. So, what do you think? What are you observing? What are you witnessing in 2020? Because 2020 is a very strange time in our history. There's a lot of truths coming out. There's the world is definitely shifting. On a spiritual level, for me, I definitely feel like the world is shifting, and that's difficult to talk about sometimes because it's hard to articulate and hard to talk about. But what are you observing, like with the people that you work with and your personal observations of what is happening in 2020? Like, what are you seeing unfold for the world and for humanity?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, this year's come with many challenges, but right from the start, I noticed in my clients and people online that are asking me questions, it really, as I just said, these difficult times are the times that make us ask the hard questions and open us up to, we can continue our 9-to-5 jobs or whatever our life may be. And then when we're like shaken up like this, it's when we start asking, what's our purpose here? What's actually happening on our planet? So I'm grateful for this year that it's really brought up a lot of those conversations and giving us the space to ask them and decide where we want to go from here and reevaluate what's most important in our lives too. Like a lot of people are losing a lot of stuff, their businesses, their homes even. And when you lose everything, that's the time when you're looking around like what actually is meaningful to me in this life. And in a way it can be liberating if you allow it. So I think it's, I've been saying for years now that there's something stirring, like something's going to happen. And this year hasn't been as chaotic as I was expecting because, you can feel something's happening. We can't continue the way that we have forever, right? So something has to happen. And I'm hoping this is the direction, this is the shift where we're going to start making some changes. And what actually just came up was, I don't know if you're familiar with Terence McKenna's work. Yeah. And the archaic revival, he had a theory basically that eventually we're going to come back to our tribal roots. Yeah. And I feel like this is really stirring that up. And in the way he said, like, we're going to start having dreadlocks and start having more tattoos and our tribal, like remembering that. And many people that I talk to also who, a lot of people seem to be exploring psychedelics this year as well, and ayahuasca, because they have these questions coming up. And I hear a lot of experiences hearing the ancestors. Of course, you don't need psychedelics for this. You can sit on powerful lands and meditate, and you can also hear them. But it's like a pulling back to our tribal roots. And a lot of people are experiencing this where they're having visions of tribes and seeing themselves like many years ago in these tribes, and we're coming back in communities. So this is the shift that I'm hoping is happening now. And this was kind of the awakening that we needed to begin that.
Yeah. No, I agree. You know, the thing that I've been saying is we need to reconnect to ancient wisdom. We need to reconnect to nature. You know, so much of the commercial world that we live in is, you know, it's all driven to keep us disconnected, and I'm sure some of it is just unintentional and institutionalized. And I think there's also people in powers who know what the heck they're doing, and they're actually, you know, manipulating humanity to be disconnected. What's your take on that? Like, do you actually think that there's evil happening in the world and there's people pulling strings, you know, that people actually really have that level of power? Or do you think that it's all just kind of unintentional and, you know, it's cultural, you know, humanity's just slowly kind of drifted in that direction? I'm curious to know your take on that.
Yeah, I think, you know, I don't really believe in evil. In Tantra, we don't say there's evil, wrong, or good, but there's ignorance and wisdom. So there's ignorance and wisdom. Always trying to approach anyone I'm always trying to approach everyone from my heart and understanding that they're doing the best they can on the level of consciousness that they're on. So necessarily, I don't believe that there's evil, but I do believe that it's a disconnect from our true self. It's a type of ignorance, and that's where these evil actions come from. So I really do feel that all the suffering in the world, and it's a pretty strong statement to make, but I believe all the suffering in the world would come to an end if we came back to our true nature and came back to our essence, which is love. You know, I don't think these evil feelings, it doesn't feel like that's who we are. When we sit in meditation, when we sit in these circles, when we have these experiences, it's bliss, it's love that we come back to. So I think if we came back to that, and when we come back to that, we would then remember that we're connected to everything. So these ancient tribes, like, they had it all figured out. Right now I'm just studying like Native American history, and it's so, like, it's soul shattering to read what they've been through, as well as the history in Australia. But I really feel that it's part of my path to understand this history. And it's also beautiful that their laws, everything they had was just totally set out in a way for society to work, like, in harmony with the environment, with each other. Everyone in the community is respected. The land is respected. Like, that's what we have to go back to. And I feel that we would, if we all meditated, if we sat with ourselves and came back to our connection to nature and to earth. So, but I don't feel like anyone is coming into this world and being like, I'm going to be a crappy person and, like, mess up stuff for people. And, you know, like, no one's coming here with bad intent, but I think it's definitely comes from the disconnect.
Yeah. It's such an interesting topic because, you know, on some level, like, I kind of think, you know, wouldn't it just be awesome that we could just one day all go back to, you know, living on the land and, you know, living in teepees and, you know, connecting in those ancestral tribal ways. But then it's part of the human experience to innovate and, you know, create technology. And, you know, this is the challenge for us is how do we integrate those worlds? Because, you know, on some level it feels like, all right, let me just go back to that, you know, but is that the most powerful, you know, is that the most powerful thing that we can do is just all go living back on the land? Or, you know, is it how do we figure out how to weave those worlds together? And like you said, you know, you went to this very spiritual path, and, you know, but you wanted to also live in that material world, but kind of bridge these things together. And I think that's because, you know, the impact that you can make, or the impact that I can make, is that, you know, I've done a lot of spiritual work, and I've sat in a lot of plant medicine ceremonies, and I've done a lot of work, probably much like you. And I know that it's part of my path to introduce these things to the mainstream, you know, to just very elegantly, gracefully introduce these things so that they can explore those things for themselves, rather than me dictating, let's go live on the land, let's do this, let's do that. It's, letting people find that for themselves, because that's where the empowerment is, and letting people find their own version of bridging those worlds together. So do you actually feel like that is possible, that we can really bridge modern life with, ancient wisdom?
I definitely think it's possible, but I mean, we have realistically a lot of work to do, right? Like we've messed up quite a bit, but it's definitely possible. I don't know about in our generation, but things like this happening collectively right now, again, is bringing up those questions that we have to be asking, and then hopefully we're taking more action. And you do see like the shift happening. There's more yoga studios and more veganism, and people, it's a slow, gradual awakening, but I definitely think that it's possible. A translation of Tantra is actually to weave. So Tantra is weaving together all parts of life, all parts of being, without the attached shame. And so I think it wouldn't look exactly like how it would, in our ancestors' time. We've also evolved as well in many ways. So I think we could create a new world with weaving together.
I think it's more powerful. I think if we could have that way of being and that intention of our ancestors, but weaved in with our capacity to create technology, it's like, all the answers are there for every problem in the world that we want to solve. It's all there. It's just, we're disconnected from the logistics of how to put that together, and that all comes down to the intention behind it. The paradigms that we're living in is just so driven by gross domestic product and making money and people becoming billionaires, and we've got to figure out how to unravel that so that it's about humanity than it is the individuals and us idolizing, the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world, and So it's really fascinating. It's really interesting. So what do you think is the most powerful access for people? So if people are listening to this going, I feel that, but they feel like they're not really part of that. What's the most powerful thing that people can do to connect, to start exploring this?
Well, I mean, we're at an interesting time now. Like, you could usually go into community and, seek out community is the main thing I think that we're really missing as well, and go to retreats and things like this. But honestly, the easiest, most simple thing to do, like, you don't need a teacher, you don't need, all these courses. All you have to do is just go sit in nature, open all of the senses and listen. And I think if you do that enough, like, all the answers you're seeking will come to you, and that connection will come back to you. For me, before Tantra was kind of what I already had experienced on my own for so many years, sitting in nature, put into words and finally explained what I had already experienced. So I honestly think I could answer most questions of anyone that comes to me and asks me a question for their health, for anything. I'm like, go sit in nature, open the senses and listen. Yeah. Because that's the connection that we've learned. And there's so much, like, these plants and the animals and all of this life that is around us, we ignore so much. But if we actually sit and listen, they've been on this planet longer than us. So they have messages for us. And I think when you spend more time with Earth, with Mother and in nature, everything starts to make a little bit more sense. So you can read all the books and do all that, but I think it's really just coming back to sitting and being.
Why is it so hard for people? Like, why is it so hard? Like, we probably all understand that, intellectually, and we hear about it from everybody. But why is it so difficult for us to sit still and to go into nature and do all these things that you're talking about?
I think our monkey brains want some profound, crazy answer and want to read all these texts and go to all these workshops and things, right? Like we want it for me to just go sit with that tree for an hour. Like, it just sounds too simple, but that's what, and that also what we're rejecting is usually what we need. So that rejection of like, no, I need to do all this all the time and stimulation, when really you just need to sit in silence. But we're in a society where we have constant stimulation. We're on our phones. We have all of this like all day. So sitting in silence is just, it's not like a sexy way to learn spirituality, but then going to like these retreats and posting it on your Instagram and stuff like that that's a bit more appealing, I guess. But.
So for myself, I know it's required some discipline to disconnect myself from my phone, and, like I turn my phone off an hour before I go to bed. I don't turn it on for at least an hour in the morning, so that, when I'm going into my resting phase, I'm not bombarded with all this information. And, we kind of look at our phones and we just scroll on Instagram, and on an unconscious level, we don't know that that's affecting us. We don't really understand just the depth of how much that's impacting us. And I think the only way to really understand that is to disconnect to that. So what are your practices, and what do you recommend to people do for that ability to disconnect from, that bombardment of information that we're talking about, and then reconnect to, sitting still and being present?
Yeah, I think a big part of it is moving out of the mind and into the body and into the senses. So for me, I'm finishing my next book right now. So I'm spending like hours on my laptop, but I actually have a reminder once an hour on my phone to dance. So every hour I'm like, okay, because I'm so like masculine writing all the time, and I can get lost in that for honestly days and then mess up my sleep schedule and everything, but I'm passionate about it. But so I have to make myself get up, and like it does come with the discipline, get up, turn some music on and dance even for like one song, and then go back to my work. Because when we're online all day, when we're learning, when we have this stimulation, we're in our mind, like we're so in our mind, all that energy. So coming back, moving the body, closing the eyes, coming back to like, that's very feminine rather than just doing all the time, which is masculine. So coming back to that feminine flowing. And for me, like a big part of what I teach is opening the sacred senses. So using, like, when we are able to fully open them, then everything we do becomes a meditation, a form of meditation. So even working or doing the dishes, if you close your eyes for a moment and just open all of the senses and send love to the breath moving through you, just coming back to the body, into this moment, and love for the life that is going through you, I think that helps a lot, rather than, just being in the mind all the time, which is so easy to do.
What comes to mind as you're speaking this is, we're so sold these days in the idea of, we've got to find our purpose and live our purpose. But our monkey mind likes to look for that in the career or the vehicle or the business as something that's external from that. And, whilst I think that there is a higher meaning for us, there's, some way, but the way, for me, the way I explain channeling into that is by bringing purpose to what you're doing. So rather than focusing on that external thing and what is my purpose and trying to articulate that, because you're just forever looking outside of yourself, and your purpose is fleeting. If purpose is changing, it's dynamic. So, everything you're talking about there is leading to this idea of, gratitude and being present and bringing purpose to what you're doing and sacredness to what you're doing in every moment. And then that is actually what is going to lead you to, your higher purpose or whatever that big mission in life is. But without the sacredness of how you're living your life, you're always disconnected. You're always seeking. You're always searching. So it's really it's really beautiful. One of the things that has really helped me with that sacredness is, and this is, I don't advocate doing plant medicine ceremonies for everybody. I think, people should find it. But, what we're talking about in these ceremonies is you understand the sacredness of how these things are run, like what you witness in these ceremonies. And I'm sure you have these practices that you work with clients, and in Tantra and in yoga, the sacredness of how these things are done. When you witness that, it gives you a lot of observation around how you live your life. It's like, you kind of get insights to how messy things are, and just being witness to that sacredness on such a profound, meticulous level is very, very powerful. Is that something that you've experienced for yourself?
Do you mean like specifically in those types of environments?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of like a lone wolf. So my psychedelic experience, I do ceremony on my own, which I don't recommend to everyone. I just love being alone in nature. So most of my experiences have been alone. But I mean, the first time I had an experience like that, it changed my whole life. I was in university studying wildlife biology, and then I went into the mountains, took some psychedelics in New Zealand by myself, like camped out on a volcano for 5 days and went through this crazy journey within myself for the first time taking any substance. So it was an interesting journey. But it changed my whole purpose and my whole path, because like, obviously it's a cliche thing. I went and did psychedelics and became a yoga teacher, but that's what happened. And actually it was because I could step back for the first time and really see my life from a different perspective, not attaching as Krystal, like stepping back from Krystal and seeing this kind of play out in front of me. And I went from taking wildlife biology. At the time I was volunteering at different wildlife conservation projects around mostly Asia, but around the world. And every night I was going to bed, like the conditions were really, really rough. And I would go to bed with like a net with giant spiders and like scary bugs all over me. And I'm like looking at them. I'm like, is this worth it? Like, am I really making an impact? I didn't feel fulfilled. And I thought my whole life, that's what I wanted to do, was to help animals. And that experience made me realize that I had to get to the source of the animals suffering, which was humans and our mindset. So that's when I realized, like, again, it's coming back to that connection with humanity and being like, I don't need to disconnect from humanity and try to help this group of animals, but I actually have to integrate with humans and try to help and spread that, I guess, that experience that I had up on a mountain out to others. So
yeah, that's actually really profound wisdom to get, to have that passion for the animals, but then to get that wisdom that the work is with humanity. It's, not with the animals. The animals will be fine without us. The work that we have to do is here. So that's really profound. That's really beautiful. Hey, I was doing a little bit of research and, stalking your Instagram the other day, and I saw a video that you did. The title was something like, "Can wearing makeup be spiritual?" Something like that. Mm-hmm. And I found that really, really interesting because, I think that's really relevant for people, because when people start to explore spirituality, I think when you don't understand it, it's very almost foreign. It's like really disconnected. It's like spirituality is way over there as something that you do. And it's, people like you and I have done so much work and so much weaving that it's all just part of my human experience now. I don't even consider myself spiritual. I'm just me. It's just who I am. But when you're kind of starting out on that and you're exploring that, it almost seems like really kind of weird. And then, like you said, it's like when you start getting insights for yourself from spirituality, then you start almost becoming disconnected and you want to go throw yourself deep into that. And I thought that was really, really powerful, that video that you did. So do you just want to talk through that? In terms of how can people show up as being spiritual, but still kind of live in this world where they get to express themselves and wear nice clothes. And, I think it's a really cool conversation.
Yeah. Well, firstly, I think like we've made this identity of what spirituality is, and that's the opposite of what spirituality is. We like to develop these ideas, and I think that was one of the first YouTube videos I ever made when I first came online, because I knew people were going to be asking, well, why are you wearing makeup and you're saying you're spiritual? Like, personally, I've never called myself spiritual. I think we're all spiritual because we're spiritual beings. So no one's more spiritual than the next person. We're just, maybe someone's further on a specific path. But to me, spiritual is spirit ritual, which is a ritual of coming back to the spirit each day. And that's the spiritual experience, like remembering our spirit. So we're all, no one's more spiritual. And I do get asked that all the time, people coming on to my accounts and saying, oh, well, you look this way and you do this. That's so spiritual. Wow, you're so enlightened. Like saying, obviously that I'm not being authentic when really it's the opposite. But the purpose of that was at the time too, I worked with different deities and goddess as well as god archetypes, which are really seen as, I like to say, icons of consciousness. So they're just like ways for us to see what we want to be. And Lakshmi is the one that I really embraced during that time because she is beauty. She's everything beautiful in the world. So that can be what we perceive as beautiful. It's been around for thousands of years. Egyptians wore makeup and they had very interesting rituals to look a certain way, more attractive to their partners. Like, it doesn't, of course, it's being tainted, if you want to say, in our society, the way that we look at beauty and the pressure we put onto women, especially. But there is a way to approach it where, like, when I do my makeup, it's an act of self-love and it's embodying the goddess to me. So there's a more conscious way of approaching that. And then, what I also want to say there is when you come back as the observer and you realize, like, I'm not Krystal, I'm not Krystal's thoughts, this is kind of like an avatar of how I'm experiencing this world. So when we detach from, this body in that way, like, we realize this isn't our truth, and the rest, like, everything else is just a play. So if you want to dress up crazy, if you want to be like this, like, if you're not hurting anyone, we don't need to take it so seriously, right? So, like, spirituality shouldn't be serious either. Like, some people are, why do you shave and why do you wear makeup? It's like, we can't put rules onto what spirituality is. Like, that makes no sense. So just showing up, like, what makes you feel good and coming from that space rather than, putting all these ideas and labels onto what, like, I don't know, it's the opposite of like.
No, I agree. Like, the most spiritual people I know, you would never even know are spiritual because they don't need to go around telling the world, look how spiritual I am. They don't have to wear it as a badge, So, and what I like about this conversation, and maybe you can chime in here, is like this. I think for a lot of people, and it's for men and for women, whatever, it's very easy to suffer from body image kind of things. And the question that I have for myself is, if I want to go to the gym and I want to build my muscle and I want to look good, I want to have the aesthetics, why am I doing that? What's the intention behind that? Is it to fill some kind of void of something that is missing? So I need to overcompensate and show up as like this big, strong man. Is that an overcompensation, or am I doing this out of self-love, like because I feel strong and makes me feel confident? And I think it's, women have their own version. Yeah, it's the same thing. There's, body physique, and then, you guys have got makeup, and there's all sorts of extra layers, I think, for women. So what I was kind of hearing before was when you're actually doing your makeup, it's like there's an intent behind it. Like, you're in that space of gratitude and self-love and presence as you're doing it, so that it's not from a place of I need to mask myself to make myself feel better out of, filling that void, right?
Yeah, it's really, again, coming back to intention behind everything we do. Like you said, why am I doing this? Really coming back and being honest with ourselves too. Like I catch my ego all the time, and at first I'm like, no, and then there's rejection. And it's like, no, that's it. So let's like not do that and do something that, feels better coming from the heart. Yeah, I also think like it's again detaching, but like this is kind of a similar topic of the question I receive a lot, which is like, can I be successful and can I make money while I'm on a spiritual path? And of course you can, but it's just not overly identifying with the amount that you have in your bank account or like how you look, your muscles. Like it's overly identifying and then becoming that. Nothing's going to last forever. Like you can have all your money taken away tomorrow. Something can happen. You don't never know. You could have a physical disorder where you can't go to the gym anymore. So it's like knowing your truth again and just kind of seeing this as something you can play with. Like, yes, I want to be abundant. I want to be prosperous, but I'm not going to be a different person tomorrow if that's all taken away from me. Yeah. So kind of the way I see it is just a play. Like it's, it's our birthright to be abundant and to enjoy all of these things. Because why would, when we renounce everything, like why would we have access to it? And why would it feel like abundant and good if we do these things, if we're not supposed to be experiencing them? So I think I was just reading a finance book recently, and it was talking about a European man who was a billionaire, and then he had his money taken away and he committed suicide. And then like a couple of days later, he got the money back or something. So it was just like, that was really identified so much that he couldn't live anymore without his money. Because that was what he based his whole identity on, his whole life was getting to that point.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's really powerful. Let me change tune a little bit. I mean, you're a vegan. You have been for a long time, I assume.
Yeah. Since I was 15.
Okay. And was that purely born out of, the love of protecting animals, or, or has it ever been like you just feel like your body doesn't need to consume meat?
When I became vegan, I was 15 and I picked up a book. I was really into health and fitness really young. Like when I was 11, I was going to the gym. So I picked up this diet book, and when I heard vegan before, I thought it was like a cult or something at the time. It really wasn't like a big thing back then. So I was kind of like, but it looks cool, so I'll read this book. And I ended up, the only book that I've read from start to finish in one sitting, and I was shaking and crying because I didn't realize, like I always said I was a big animal lover, but I didn't realize about factory farms. I just ate whatever my parents gave me, so I never put it together, and I knew I would never be able to have dairy or meat again. So it was from the animals, but then I just felt better, and I started, like I found a love for cooking and exploring different plants and herbs and spices. And the more that I researched, I then realized that I don't personally think we're made to eat meat. And I've never been deficient on anything. And it's been like, I don't know how many years now, but like 16 years or something. So yeah, I think on all levels and just its impact on the planet right now, obviously the farming and raising billions of animals a year just to be tortured and killed. That's not I think we can do a little better than that. I don't think it's our highest good on the planet. But with that being said, I've stayed with tribes that do hunt and eat meat, and they changed my perspective a little as well, as I'm doing it in a way where it's sacred. Yeah. And again, it's like with the intention behind it and in harmony with the environment. So, yeah.
And I mean, that's the reason I asked the question, is because, I'm not sure if veganism is something you promote, but I mean, I've interviewed vegans, I've interviewed carnivore people, and it's not for because I believe in any one thing. It's because I like giving people all the information and letting them understand everything. But I think, we need to, humans can cut down their meat consumption by 80%. We don't need to eat anywhere near as much meat that we do. And I think, and the question is, how can we have sustainable, healthy, farming to the point where we can have that, something of a reconnection, to nature, and let the animals live as if they're in nature, because I don't think as humans we understand what we're consuming. We don't understand that we are consuming the energy of something that was killed in a factory in a very inhumane way. And I think, you got that from a very young age to understand that on an energetic level. And, that's why I try to be as conscious as I can. I eat, very little meat these days, but it's more because I'm feeling into what my body needs. What does my body actually need? And then when I do eat meat, it's like I'm trying to make very conscious choices about what I'm consuming and where does that come from, and knowing that I am consuming, the energy of that animal. And I think that's a really important part of this understanding of, it's not about being vegan, it's not about being a carnivore, it's not about being on a particular diet. It's just being really in tune with understanding what you're actually eating. Like you are what you eat, but on so many different levels. It's not just the material of what we're consuming. It's like, the energy is so, like we all know that when somebody prepares something with love, we can taste it. That's in there. And the same way, if something was killed inhumanely, it's like, that's what you're eating.
Yeah. I personally don't believe that we can reach our highest potential, especially energetically, while we're consuming the emotions and energy of fear and torture, especially the animals that were born into that and that spent their whole lives, seeing slaughter. So I do think that holds us back. And again, it comes from the disconnect with, we're not paying attention to what we eat. So one of my first practices that I give any of my students is practicing meditative eating and making it a ritual, turning your phone off, sitting with your food. And as you eat, like first giving thanks and then envisioning all the processes that food took to get in front of you. The people that might have grown it and processed it and whatever processes it went through. If it was an animal, like praying for that animal, its life. And I think if you're doing that, it's not going to feel good doing it to a, McDonald's burger, because like, you don't even know the processes that it went through, and you don't even know really what it is eating. So once you come back again to that connection, then I think naturally you're just going to make healthier choices.
Yeah, no, that's really powerful. What are some of your other daily rituals? You mentioned before that your one non-negotiable is that the gratitude journaling piece. What are some of your other daily habits and rituals that keep you in this space of being connected and in alignment with your highest purpose and your highest energy?
So I have my mindful mornings, which now I commit to, because you, like being in self-help, I'm sure you probably get up early, or, like the 5 a.m. club and everything. For me, it just doesn't work for me. And I tried to push myself for so long, because I'm like, every entrepreneur gets up early. I have to do this. So I'm like trying to get up early. And then I'm a zombie and I only got a few hours of sleep and I'm miserable. And I did it for months. I'm like, I'm not as efficient. So I really had to finally like honor what works best for me. And I had partners that used to like be upset that I take so long to wake up in the morning. Like I have like silence, and I'm not a morning person. So for me, like I had all this guilt around, I need to like, my life has to look this way. Finally, I started honoring what my body is asking for, and that's to have silent mornings. So I try not to plan anything before 11 or 12 in the afternoon. Of course, I'm, really blessed to have this space to be able to do that. So I'll wake up in the morning, and before I open my eyes, like gratitude is such a big part of my life. So before I open my eyes, I'll think of 10 things I'm grateful for. 5 of them being the most obvious that come first to mind, which is usually like my dog that I'm cuddling with, and like my health and travel, like things like that. And then the next 5 will be things that I look past, usually sensual things. So like the bright orange flowers that are next to my door that I walk by every day. The feeling of the wind when I first opened the door this morning, the light shining through the tree when I meditate, like things like that I just look past usually. So in that way, it's like opening my senses before I even open my eyes in the morning, and starting with gratitude. And then I go into a mantra meditation, which I do with my beads 108 times. I'm usually working with a deity, or my dog's looking around where that's coming from. So I do mantra, calling in whatever goddess. Usually I'm working with a goddess at the time, embodying that frequency. So I'm calling it in, but also embodying it for my day ahead. And then I just move my body. That's like one thing that I definitely have to start my day with, which I usually do through Kundalini or a little bit of yoga or dance. And that's my day. And then I have tea and like read for a bit. But I think gratitude and movement and moving the body is like very important for me. So
yeah, that's beautiful. I mean, the thing that occurs to me through as you talk is that you've really embodied this, just being present, being connected to that presence all day in everything that you do, and having, intention of presence in how you show up, to whatever you're doing on the computer, whatever you're doing in a meeting somebody, to bring that with you in every moment of the day, I think is the work. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's very, very powerful. Let me ask you about your entrepreneurship journey, because you're running retreats, and, you've developed an app, tell us about that. What's it been like being an entrepreneur for you? Like, have you had struggles with that? Has it been super easy for you? You were saying before about the relationship between spirituality and making money, and what's that relationship been for you between spirituality and entrepreneurship?
Yeah, well, I can't lie. It's been a tough journey. I don't think entrepreneurship, when you're starting, completely on your own, it can be very isolating and a lot of like long days on your own. So I think that has been the biggest struggle for me, just staying committed to it. And there's kind of a misconception with money in the spiritual world. Personally, I never really struggled with it, because it just makes sense to me that money is a type of energy, and it's an energy exchange. So a lot of yoga teachers I talk to are very uncomfortable asking for money, but I also think it comes from the lack of self-worth. So having developed that self-love and self-worth first. Something that's come up a lot on my journey, just being in like the spiritual community, the spiritual world online, is this idea that like everything's just supposed to be easy and flow easily. And I was struggling with this a lot, especially at the start. Like my app it took 2 years to get it released, and there was many, many obstacles on the way. And for a while I was just thinking like the people around me, like other teachers and the community I was in, were like, oh, it's just not flowing too easy, so just like let it go and try something else. I'm like, well, I'm pretty passionate. Like, this is really what I want to do. I feel like this is, going to be my way of helping the world the most I can right now. So there's this idea that like, I think it comes a lot from law of attraction, and law of attraction, like there's scientific proof behind it, so I don't disagree with it, but I just think that it's almost toxic to feel like everything's just supposed to come to us easily and we don't have to work for anything, and really focusing on things outside of ourselves as well. So a big part of it was realizing like sometimes you have to work hard for things. Sometimes, it's not just going to flow easily to you. And that was me kind of going against everything that everyone was saying around me, and just being like, I think that, this is like a big topic for me too, because it's coming up a lot in the spiritual community where, like we just attract whatever we want and everything should be easy. And I feel like if I saw that when I was a teenager, and I grew up in a very rough area of Canada, I was working like pretty much whenever I was out of high school, I was going to my job that I got home from at 3 a.m. and then I'd sleep a few hours and go to high school, because I wanted a different life for myself. And I feel like if I went online and saw these spiritual people saying, oh, well, if it doesn't flow to you easily, if you have to work hard, then, like, don't do it. So I think that would have been hard for me to see and to understand. And that's why that came up a lot, especially the last year on my journey. And finally I realized, like, again, it's the balance between doing and being. Like, just expecting everything to come is very feminine, because feminine is receptive. So just receiving everything is great, but also doing as well, and not just being like 100% in the feminine where I'm never going to work for anything or chase anything. I think it's like, again, finding the perfect balance. So that was a big part of mine. But
yeah, no, that's really cool. I mean, mine's the opposite. I had my first business when I was 8 and worked really hard. And, in the last 5 years, the work for me has been working on my stillness. And the more that I can, I have that inherent belief for myself that if I lost everything today, I can just, I can pick it up so easily, because I've done the hard work. I feel like in some ways I've kind of earned my stripes to some degree. But I also know that the way for me to create more is now through stillness. I now feel like I have this capacity to make things move around me instead of me being the one to move. But like you said, you got to keep that balance. You got to, do this dance. You got to, figure out this dance, between those energies. And it's really beautiful for you to share that about the law of attraction, because I think it's such a misconception, that we can just sit there and meditate and stuff's going to fall in our lap, So I think it's really, really powerful. So I've got one final question for you, but before I do that, I just want to make sure that I can introduce people to you. What's the best way to find you, to learn more from you? Instagram, is that your preferred way of communicating with people?
Yeah, I'm pretty active on Instagram and YouTube mostly. So it's just Krystal Aranyani on all handles. It's the easiest way.
Yeah. So I'll make sure everybody's got the links, and I encourage everybody to go check out Krystal and the videos that she's got on Instagram and YouTube. There's some good ones about relationships as well, which I like. So that's really, really, really cool. I'll make sure that everybody's got the links, goes and checks it all out. Krystal, thank you so much for your time and your presence, and like I said before, like that bravery to share your story, I feel like is giving permission to so many people, and then to create this, to weave this fabric that you have of way of being and doing is really beautiful. So you're a really great example for what's possible for people. So thank you.
Thank you so much for that. So, I appreciate it.
One final question, and that is, if you had the one-time superpower of mental telepathy to connect one short message with all of humanity, all 7.8 billion or whatever the number is now, what would that message be?
Oh, wow. I guess tapping into everything that we just said, if you want to sum it up, just sit with yourself and send yourself love. I think everything, the quality of your life, everything you do, your relationships, it all starts with self-love. Your connection to everything is coming back to that love. So, and sitting in nature.
Yeah. That's really powerful. Krystal, thank you so much for your time. Much appreciated. Guys, make sure you go check out Krystal. And I'll see you next time back down the rabbit hole. Krystal, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Monty.